Okay, so today I wanted to offer some reflections about boarding school syndrome and why, as ex-boarders, we struggle with the end of summer and, in particular, as well, with change. Why do we struggle with change? Why do we struggle with a change of seasons or, going off on holiday or something changing? Why is that? I thought I'd just share some reflections of also what we can do about that. Okay, so it is the 23rd of August today, and yeah, seasons are changing. I had this hot summer here in the UK, and starting to get a little cooler. And I just noticed that little feeling within myself of it's dissipated as I've done work on myself, but just a little bit of, oh, we're coming up for autumn. And for some, that's like a real celebration. And yet for me, and I've often heard this with ex-boarders, I was speaking to a friend probably 20 years ago, and he was like, oh, it's that time of year. I just feel a lot of fear. It's like I've got to go back to school. And while most of us won't necessarily kind of recognize that and see, that's possibly why I have this fear now, is why we struggle around the end of summer, is this idea that we would be going back to school in maybe a week's time or a few weeks' time. And for me, I remember that the build up to going back to school there was fear. It was like, I really don't want to go. It was kind of, and I also remember it was like putting up the walls. I've spoken before about this idea that we build up these psychic walls, and Nick Duffel, Joy Shavrin talks about this idea that we build up these walls. And I remember at home, I would take them down just a little bit. They'd still be kind of there, I'd still keep distance. But in that preceding, couple of weeks before going back to school, it was like, right, time to put the walls back up. So that's kind of one of the reflections I just wanted to make today. Is it might quite well be that you're feeling quite a bit of fear, or some of the other emotions, apprehension. Another thing, snappy. Notice you might be getting snappy with your family or your children, your husband or your wife. You might become quite controlling or even go into anger. And these are all things that I notice, again, happens to me a lot less now. But these are things that I've noticed, and especially around change. So, for example, if I'm going away on a trip, or maybe I'm going abroad, I will often find some of these emotions start to bubble up. And why we struggle is that change, it was almost like we had change kind of put upon us every few weeks. You'd kind of be at school, you'd kind of get used to it, and then you go home, it'd be like, yeah. Then you get home and it'd be like, oh, it's not so easy here. And you'd be like, oh, but I don't want to go back to school. And so we're always in this space of there being fear around change. What are we going to find when we get back to school? What we can find when we get back home. So many of my clients or people that I have connected with would say that parents would move house during the holiday time, during the term time. So they'd come home, it's like, where are we going? Where's our old house? Oh, we've moved. So this trauma, this separation. So I think one of the things is to bring that awareness, this idea that we have shadow, that which is unconscious, by bringing some light to it, going, okay, yeah, this is why I'm feeling this fear at the moment. It's just a process, the amount of times we would leave home and then come back. For some of us, it was hundreds of times at boarding school. For me, it was probably just dozens. But for some who were there for 10 years or 15 years, as I know some people were, 14 years from age 4, it's this repetition. So the invitation during this time is to bring mindfulness. This is what I'm feeling. Bring the breath in. Breathe in for 4, breathe out for 6. Feel what we feel. Okay, I'm feeling some fear. That's okay. Just bring mindfulness. This is okay. What often we do is we don't breathe and we just react. We get angry at people, or we say things to hurt others, or maybe we shut down and withdraw ourselves. That came up for me recently, this idea that I have to do everything on my own. And often that can be a wound. So if we can just breathe, reconnect with our partner, say, you know what, this just reminds me of going back to boarding school. I used to get quite upset around this time, but I didn't know how to describe it or talk about it. Other things, EFT. So tapping through the points and feeling what you feel. There's about 8 points under the arm as well. And just tap. This is what I feel. Okay, yeah, feeling some fear. End of summer. Feel these blues. Don't want it to end, this lovely summer. And just notice maybe the fear, like butterflies in the stomach. Just we give space to feeling this. What we learnt at school was to suppress, push away, to deny, dissociate. What this work is just to bring mindful awareness. No, this is how I feel. I'm okay. And yeah, another thing is that it will pass. If we can have that space. One of the things I noticed when I used to move house in my 20s and my 30s, I'd give myself the space, a couple of weeks, that transition time, knowing that after 2 weeks, it would get easier. Rather than making a rash decision before that 2-week period was up, just giving myself the space to go, this will pass. And coming back to what I've spoken about in other videos, we keep our practice going, our exercise, getting to bed early, taking care of ourselves, having a nice hot bath, nice book to read. It's like, be gentle, rather than pushing ourselves, being hard. It's like, no, be gentle. We learn to be really hard with ourselves, hit ourselves over the head with a hammer when we're at boarding school. Now the opportunity is just to slow down and be gentle with ourselves. So some reflections there. And yeah, podcast wise, I've been speaking to Robert Verkijk, who's an author of Posh Boys, hopefully coming onto the podcast. And then Petter, I've forgotten his surname, a Swedish man who's an expert on boarding school, and especially from the perspective of Sweden. So hopefully he will be coming on. And I've just booked on today, just spoken to Martin Lloyd Elliott, who is a psychotherapist and psychologist, to talk about leadership, wounding, boarding school. He's an ex-boarder himself, and so that's booked in for October. And I've also booked my trip down to London to go and see Nick Duffel to film him for the upcoming film. So that's exciting. I will keep you updated. If you've not registered your interest in supporting the film, I'll leave the link in the description. Just to leave your email address and to say, yes, I'm interested, either supporting, sharing the film, showing your financial support. When we're looking for fundraising, we'll do some crowdfunding at some point. If you're interested, please do leave your details below. But thank you, and any reflections, please do let me know.